Have you ever wondered what it would be like to make your own homemade pasta at home using your stand mixer? If so, stay tuned because today I'm going to be doing a quick little review on the KitchenAid pasta roller set like this one. This is the KPRA pasta roller set by KitchenAid. こんばんは, Pat Tokuyama here, creator of the Japanese Cooking Club, where I help people learn how to make plant-based Japanese food. Today what we're going to be doing is not making anything. We're going to be doing a little product review for the KitchenAid pasta roller and cutting set. It's basically a 4-piece set that includes this little paintbrush here, which is not really a paintbrush. It's more of a brush to get off some of the excess flour and dried pasta, as well as a pasta roller, which is going to roll your pasta dough into sheets, and then a spaghetti cutter, as well as a fettuccine cutter. And that's essentially it. So stay tuned because I'll be telling you all about my experiences using this, as well as some of the pros and cons and a few tips that I have for you so that you can make your fresh pasta, homemade fresh pasta, a delicious success. All right, so the reason why I got this, actually I didn't get it, it was actually a gift to me for Christmas. My mom got it for me several years ago, so I've had this for a while and I've used it many times. In fact, you can find some of the recipes for some of the pastas that I've made, fresh pastas that I've made with this set on my blog, alldie.com, so make sure to check it out if you want to see what I've made with it. In terms of why would you want fresh pasta, well, I think it really comes down to texture and flavor. If you're making your own pasta, you can really control the texture. You can experiment and try different flours, for example, home milled flours. For me, I actually got a grain mill earlier this year to experiment not only with my bread baking, but also my fresh pasta. So I mill my own flour at home, and that gives me a lot of flexibility in terms of the types of grains that I can use. I can have fun doing it while enjoying fresh pasta. So if that's something that you've always wanted to do, maybe that's something that you can try if you get this set. And if you have any kind of a KitchenAid stand mixer with the little hole in the front, then you can probably use this set. So it doesn't get any harder than that. In fact, the hardest thing is probably getting the dough consistency correct and also practicing how to use this. It took me a few times before I really got the hang of it, but once you get the hang of it, you can make pretty much any kind of flat pasta, including the spaghetti. In terms of what it is that you can make with this, like I mentioned, you have the roller, so that's going to give you sheets of pasta, which you can use for lasagna. You can do the fettuccine and then the spaghetti as well. And also you can make Japanese noodles like ramen as well as soba noodles. So that's, if you're going to be making those types of noodles, you'd want to use the spaghetti cutting set. So in terms of some of the pros and cons, let's go ahead and start with some of the cons. So the first con is that this is a very specialized device. You can't really do too much with it. Like I mentioned, you have spaghetti, fettuccine, and then the Japanese noodles if you're going to be making those, as well as the flat noodles like if you would be using for lasagna. The second con is that this is going to take practice. It's not super intuitive or simple to use, but once you do it a few times, you'll kind of know what to expect, especially in terms of what thickness that you're going to be using it, what speed you're supposed to be using on your mixer, and then how to feed it without getting a mess on your counter or getting a bunch of spätzle or little uncut, irregular shaped pieces of dough, which happened to me the first few times I tried to make my fresh pasta. So it's going to take practice, and if only it were easier to use, maybe more people would use this set. Who knows? So the second con is that it does require you to stand by your mixer while the dough is rolling out and also while it's cutting, because you need to make sure that you're going to flour, especially the cut noodles, so that they don't stick to each other, because once they fall out, then they fall out. So you got to be there to catch it and then put it into a little nest or put it onto a pasta drying rack, which I have right here. And this is definitely something that I recommend you try to use. If you haven't gotten one of these yet, you can get the one by KitchenAid, which is this one. That'll help you with your pasta making, because you can make a bunch of pasta all at once and then you can dry it for future use, or if you're going to be cooking for a large amount of people, you probably want to cook all that pasta at once in a big pot as opposed to doing it one by one. So that's another reason why you might want to consider getting one of those pasta drying racks. The second thing is that even though this is made of stainless steel, there are some plastic pieces here, and because I've had this for several years now, I've noticed that there's some little cracks that have developed on the bottom. So don't know why they use plastic there, but it would have been nice if they used stainless steel for the entire thing. The third con is that that you can't dishwash this, so I usually just wipe it with a soapy sponge and then this brush as well, which you can get off some of the dried bits of pasta, but you'll notice that sometimes, I think I didn't clean this well last time, there's a little bit of flakes of dough. You want to make sure to get that off before you start a new batch so that your new batch doesn't get affected and get stuck in there, which has happened before. So you want to make sure you have very clean rollers, especially if you're going to be using a new batch of dough. The last con is that it's going to take time. So usually I do about 2 to 3 pounds in batches, and it takes at least an hour to do all of that because these are somewhat small, so you can usually only do about a ½ pound at a time. At least that's how I divide up my dough. So a ½ pound fits in here, so I roll that out, do the other ½ pound, roll that out, and then I cut both of them, and then I repeat it with a second or third batch. It's gonna take time, and I wish that these were a little bit, I wonder if they could have made it like twice as big so that you could do a full pound. Maybe that would have been too messy, I don't know, but that's certainly a con in my eyes that it does take a little bit more time than I think that it should. So now let's get into some of the pros. One, I think it's pretty simple to use. All you got to do is attach it and then feed it the dough. It's going to take some practice like I mentioned, but once you get the hang of it, all doughs are pretty much the same. And then in terms of the cutting, once you have your desired thickness, then all you got to do is feed it into the cutters and out will come your spaghetti, or out will come your fettuccine, or if you're doing Japanese noodles, out will come your soba noodles or your ramen noodles. So very simple to use. Two, I guess the second thing is that these are relatively well made. They're very heavy, and aside from the plastic that I mentioned previously, I think these last a pretty long time, so don't really have any concerns about that. Three, they're simple to clean. Like I mentioned, you really need this brush only when there's little pieces that are stuck inside. Otherwise, you don't really have to put them in the dishwasher. You're not supposed to. And in fact, it says do not immerse in water on all of these because chances are, I'm sure somebody must have put these into the dishwasher or in the sink by accident. So I'm sure that's why they put those little messages there to remind you. So the fourth pro is that these three attachments are very good at what they do. The roller is very effective at rolling. The spaghetti cutter is effective at cutting spaghetti as well as soba and ramen, like I mentioned. And then the fettuccine is very effective at cutting fettuccine. And then the fifth pro is that these don't take up too much space. As you can see, I actually used the original box that it came in to store these, and I just put them above my stove right there, and that's about all the space that it takes. And as compared to something that would be like a manual, a hand crank, where you're going to be manually cutting the pasta, that would probably take up at least 2 to 3 times as much space as one of these. So that's something to consider as well. So that's one of the pros in my opinion. Another pro, number 6, is that these are a little bit more effective and more efficient, in my opinion, than the pasta extruder set. So if you're looking at that, and depending on, I guess, the type of pasta that you're trying to make, this might be a better option for you, especially if you're just going to be focusing on the flat noodles like fettuccine and spaghetti, which is not really flat, but the fettuccine is flat and the spaghetti is more rounded, as well as if you want to make soba noodles or ramen noodles, this might be a better option for you. It's a little bit less fussy in my opinion, because if you've seen the review for the KitchenAid pasta extruder set, which I'll link in a card or in the description below, you can see what I thought about that little attachment set and the constant cutting that you have to do for each set of noodles that it extrudes. So for this does the cutting for you. All you got to do is scoop it up and then put it into a nest or put it on your drying rack. And then the 7th pro is going to be that it fits with any KitchenAid attachment, or it fits with any KitchenAid stand mixer, so it doesn't really matter what kind of what size you have, but it should fit. That's the good thing about using KitchenAid attachments. Okay guys, so now we've talked about the pros and cons. Anything that I forgot to mention, I'll make sure to put in the description below, as well as a link to the product if you want to check it out and do your own research. Also, let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Question of the day, do you think that this pasta roller set has what you need to make fresh pasta at home? And if it does, let me know in the comments below. And if it doesn't, let me know what it is that you're looking for, and yeah, because I would be curious if maybe there's something better on the market that I should be looking at or getting. Okay, so before we wrap up, just a few tips that I have for using this particular pasta cutting attachment set by KitchenAid. So the first thing that I have in terms of tips for using the pasta attachment set is to use the recipe book that it came with, because that's what I started with, and I think that'll give you a good feel of what you're supposed to expect in terms of the texture, not only of the dough, but also of the final pasta once you've cooked it on the stove. The second tip that I have for you is to experiment with different types of flour, also ingredients, like I mentioned in my other video, to try putting vegetables like tomato or spinach, or even some herbs like basil or even shiso into your pasta, because that'll give it a nice unique flavor that you can't get anywhere else except for in your own kitchen because you made it. So the third tip that I have for you is to be patient with yourself. Like I mentioned, it took me a few tries to get the pasta right and to get used to using this, not only with the speed but coordinating the dough and cutting it. That's going to take some practice, so don't get upset or angry if you can't do it the first few times. I know it can be frustrating, but be patient with yourself. It'll be worth it in the end. And then the fourth tip that I have for you is to do large quantities. So as you may know, if you've done fresh pasta before, it does take a little bit of effort. It's not as easy as opening a package and then boiling it on the stove. You've actually got to make the dough first, you got to let it rest, then you got to roll it out, and then you got to cut it. So it's a lot more involved in terms of labor, but the flavor and the texture is unlike anything else. And if you've had fresh pasta, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't had fresh pasta, you'll soon find out, especially if you buy this set. So the fifth thing that I want to wrap up with is that stay tuned for a future video, which I'm going to be talking about Japanese style pasta, some of the tips that I've learned and started to incorporate in whenever I make Japanese style pasta. So if you want to learn what those tips are, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Leave any questions or comments below if you have them. And I think that's going to be it for this little product review. So hopefully you found it helpful, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care. Bye bye. Depending on how much you're making, as well as the, I guess, how good you are at getting it. What am I going to try to say?